My name is Dr. Maya Reeves. I'm 38 years old. I serve as a senior attending physician in trauma surgery at Harbor General, one of the busiest Level 1 trauma centers on the East Coast. Most of my work happens in the space between heartbeats and flatlines, where seconds determine whether someone goes home or goes into the ground. That night, I stood in the corner of the grand ballroom at the Riverside Country Club, pressed against a marble column near the coat check. No place card, no table assignment, no acknowledgement, just a glass of sparkling water I'd taken from a passing tray and a view of everything I was never supposed to see. The venue looked like it had been airlifted from a European palace. Crystal cascaded from the ceiling in 3 massive chandeliers. A harpist played near the carved fountain. White roses climbed 12-foot columns like they were reaching for something holy. My brother Marcus always did have a taste for grandeur. He called it celebrating life properly. I called it compensating. I hadn't seen him in 4 years. The invitation arrived in a silver embossed envelope that said black tie elegance required. I wore a simple black dress, not designer, not flashy, just something that fit and made me feel like I could breathe. I didn't need sequins to prove I existed. At least not to myself. I was checking my phone when Marcus tapped his champagne glass with a fork. He stood center stage beneath a spotlight that made his tuxedo gleam like armor. His new wife Celeste stood beside him, dripping in diamonds that caught every flicker of light. He raised his glass, scanning the crowd with practiced ease, his eyes sliding right past me. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. He grinned wide. Especially my sister Maya, who managed to pull herself away from, "What is it you do again? Cutting people open?" Laughter bubbled through the room like champagne poured too fast. "She's always been intense," he continued. "I mean, the woman sleeps 4 hours a night by choice." "Who does that?" Someone at a nearby table whispered. I thought she was a nurse or something. I didn't move. I just set my glass down on a side table. Let the joke breathe. Let it settle. He'd always done this, making me the punchline without ever raising his voice, without ever crossing a line anyone else could see. When we were kids, he'd get the solos. I'd get the back row. And even now, in a room filled with 200 guests and a customized sculpture shaped like intertwined hearts, he still needed me to be small so he could feel big. Why? I could have walked out. I could have said something. But sometimes silence is sharper than any scalpel. And in that moment, I waited. I saw it before anyone else did. A shift in the energy, a stillness that didn't belong. Celeste touched Marcus's arm, her smile flickering. Her father, seated at the head table, leaned forward slightly. His eyes moved across the room and landed on me. Dr. Leonard Ashford. Chief of Surgery at Columbia Presbyterian. Silver-haired, steel-spined, legendary. I'd seen his name on medical journals since I was in residency. I'd never met him in person. But apparently, he knew exactly who I was. He stood slowly. The legs of his chair scraped against the polished floor. Heads turned. Marcus froze mid-sentence. Dr. Ashford adjusted his cufflinks, stepped forward, and placed his hand over his heart. A gesture of respect I'd only seen in operating rooms when we honored a fallen colleague. "Dr. Reeves," he said, voice clear and steady. "It's an honor to have you here." The room went silent. Not polite silence, the kind of silence that swallows sound whole. The harpist stopped mid-note. Forks hovered in midair. A bridesmaid gasped softly. Marcus blinked. He looked at his new father-in-law, then back at me. "Wait, what?" Celeste whispered, but no one answered. All around the room, people began to stand. A surgeon in a charcoal suit. A nurse I vaguely recognized from a conference. Even a young resident in a bow tie rose to his feet, hand on his chest. They all turned toward me. And I hadn't moved an inch. The microphone slipped from Marcus's hand. It hit the stage with a sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot. He stepped back, eyes wide. Celeste reached for his arm, but he pulled away slightly. And just like that, the room turned. Not toward the groom. Not toward the toast. But toward the woman in the corner. Me. I didn't smile. Didn't speak. Didn't stand. I didn't need to. I nodded once, slow and deliberate. It wasn't permission. It wasn't pride. It was confirmation. I was here. And for the first time in years, they saw me. Not as Marcus's sister. Not as the odd one out. Not as someone to dismiss or mock. They saw me. Dr. Maya Reeves. The woman they'd tried to erase. The surgeon they could no longer ignore. And I wasn't going anywhere. 5 years before the wedding, I was in line for chief resident. After a decade of doubles, overnights, and enough sutures to stitch together a small country, the board finally recognized my name. It wasn't a surprise. It was earned. The announcement was set for Monday morning. On Friday night, I received an email from the residency director. Dr. Reeves, please confirm your withdrawal from consideration. My stomach dropped. I hadn't withdrawn. I called the hospital. Got transferred 4 times. Waited on hold until my coffee went cold. When I finally reached someone in administration, they sounded uncomfortable. Ma'am, a formal complaint was filed. Anonymous. Allegations of patient endangerment and fabricated surgical outcomes. Your name's been pulled pending investigation. I didn't yell. Didn't slam the phone. Didn't cry. Because I already knew. It took 2 weeks to get a copy of the complaint through a colleague who owed me a favor. One glance at the file and my hands went numb. Dr. Reeves has a documented pattern of taking credit for procedures she merely assisted on. I witnessed firsthand her exaggeration of her role in the Harmon case, where her involvement was minimal at best. It was a lie. But it was a strategic lie. The Harmon case had been a nightmare, a multi-organ trauma with 6 surgeons in the room. Records were messy. Timelines were blurred. Hard to verify, harder to disprove. But there was something else buried in the 3rd paragraph. A phrase that made my blood run cold. Irregardless of her technical skills. There it was. Irregardless. I hadn't seen that word in years because no one used it. No one except Marcus. He'd thrown it around in high school debates, in family arguments, even in his college essays. Our father corrected him once and Marcus snapped back, "It's in the dictionary now, so it counts." He used it like a badge after that, like proof he couldn't be wrong. And there it was again. Staring at me from a document that had destroyed my career. It wasn't proof. Not legally. But it was personal proof. Who else knew enough about the Harmon case to twist the narrative? Who else would care enough to sabotage me at the peak of my rise? Someone jealous. Someone who didn't work for his success but always wanted mine. Someone who saw my achievement as his diminishment. Marcus didn't just ignore my work. He tried to erase it. The complaint had no signature. But it didn't need one. Just like that, everything stopped. My name disappeared from the shortlist. No hearing, no rebuttal, no explanation. Just silence. The kind that follows you into every staff meeting, every surgical consult, every hallway where co-leagues suddenly won't meet your eyes. It took me 3 years to rebuild my reputation. By then, someone else had the title. Someone else had the office. And Marcus? He'd moved to California, started a tech company, got engaged to the daughter of a man whose name opened doors I couldn't even see. He thought he'd buried me with a single email. But all he did was delay the reckoning. And the wedding? That was just the opening act. Most people think medicine ends at the emergency room doors. They have no idea the real work starts in the spaces no one sees. I served for 12 years in trauma surgery, the kind that doesn't make the news unless something goes catastrophically wrong. My unit at Harbor General handled the worst of the worst. Gunshot wounds. Multi-vehicle pile-ups. Industrial accidents that required reconstructive miracles. We operated in shifts that bled into each other, under lights that never dimmed, with alarms that never stopped. You wouldn't find my name in glossy hospital brochures. You wouldn't see my photo in the donor wing. My work was written in operative notes filed in charts no one reads twice, stitched into the bodies of people who walked out alive because I made decisions in seconds that couldn't be undone. I coordinated trauma response teams. I trained residents who'd never seen a chest cracked open. I performed procedures other surgeons wouldn't touch because the risk was too high and the credit too low. I ran codes while my hands cramped from fatigue. I held pressure on arteries while waiting for blood that sometimes didn't come fast enough. I made choices that saved lives. And some that didn't. And yet, if you asked my family what I did for a living, "She works at a hospital," Marcus once said at a dinner party. "Does something with emergencies, I think. She's not really a people person." To them, I was the intense one. The one who didn't laugh at the right jokes, who didn't post vacation photos, who couldn't name a single reality TV show. The one who was smart but cold. Successful but lonely. Marcus used to say, "You'd be easier to love if you smiled more. You do realize you're a woman, right? Act like one." They didn't understand that I wasn't trying to be difficult. I was trying to keep people alive. I didn't become a surgeon to be likable. I didn't save lives so I could be comfortable at brunch. I learned to intubate while my hands shook from adrenaline. I learned to stay calm while a patient coded in front of their family. I learned to brief attending physicians twice my age without flinching, even when one of them said, "Reeves, you'd be perfect if you were a man. They'd make you a poster." That line haunted me for years. I never told Marcus. He would have laughed. Or worse, agreed. And that's the thing. You can survive a 14-hour surgery. You can handle the chaos of a mass casualty event. But nothing prepares you for the slow erosion of being invisible to your own blood. Nothing prepares you for realizing your family only celebrates victories they understand. Mine? They never asked what I did. They assumed I was cold, robotic, unfeeling. They never knew I carried the weight of lives in my hands. Never knew I made split-second calls that determined whether a mother went home to her children. Never asked if I was okay. To them, I was already gone. But I was still here. Still working. Still saving. Not for applause. But because some of us don't need to be seen to know we matter. The envelope was sleek, metallic silver with embossed calligraphy that looked like it cost more than my monthly student loan payment. It arrived on a Tuesday, wedged between a medical journal and a recall notice for a blood pressure cuff. I almost threw it in the recycling. Almost. Then I saw the names. Marcus Elijah Reeves and Celeste Noel Ashford. I froze. Not because of Marcus, though even printed, his name carried the echo of every dismissive comment and backhanded compliment I'd survived since childhood. But because of hers. Celeste Ashford. Daughter of Dr. Leonard Ashford. The name stirred something sharp in my memory. A hallway. A voice. A moment I thought I'd imagined. It was 6 years ago. I'd just finished presenting a case study on an experimental hemorrhage control technique at a national trauma conference. Something that, had it failed, would have resulted in lawsuits, not breakthroughs. The panel had been brutal. Skeptical. Cold. I stepped into the hotel corridor, still feeling the weight of their questions pressing on my chest. Then I heard it. Dr. Reeves. I turned. A man in a navy suit stood near the elevator bay. Silver hair, sharp posture, the kind of presence that didn't need introduction. Dr. Leonard Ashford. He didn't smile exactly, but there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen from the others that day. Something like recognition. He walked over slowly, glanced at my name badge, then said, "If you were a man, they'd have offered you a department chair by now." Just like that. No preamble. No politeness. Just truth, delivered like a scalpel. Clean. Precise. I'd nodded, not because I agreed, but because I understood what he meant. He wasn't complimenting me. He was indicting the system. And now his daughter was marrying my brother. I stared at the silver card. Marcus had chosen a venue that sounded like a fragrance line, Riverside Estate. The dress code requested elegance and glamour. There was a handwritten note clearly aimed at me. Please, no scrubs or hospital talk. This is a celebration, not a medical conference. I almost laughed. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Toss the card. Pretend I'd never seen it. But another part, the part that remembered the hallway, the words, the weight of being seen by someone who mattered, that part hesitated. If Dr. Ashford was going to be there, maybe this wasn't about Marcus at all. Maybe it was about something bigger. Legacy. Respect. The reason my name got buried in the first place. I ran my thumb along the edge of the card. It caught the light like fool's gold. Maybe I'd go. Not for Marcus. Not for the party. But because when a system tries to erase you, sometimes the most radical thing you can do is show up. My name is Dr. Maya Reeves. I'm 38 years old. I've worn scrubs for over a decade. I've worked in rooms where death waits in the corner. I've issued orders that restarted hearts that had already given up. I've stood over open chests and made calls that changed the trajectory of entire families. But the night I flew home for my brother's wedding, I felt still. Not weak. Not uncertain. Just still, like the moment before the first incision, when everything is possible and nothing is guaranteed. I booked a red-eye out of Boston, the kind of flight that boards after the airport has exhaled its daylight chaos. It was easier that way. No small talk. No colleagues asking why I looked like I was heading into battle with nothing but a carry-on. I wore the black dress, the one I'd bought for a hospital gala I never attended. Simple. Clean. Unadorned. I didn't need embellishment to prove anything. Not anymore. The Uber to Logan was quiet. The driver asked if I was traveling for work. I said family. He didn't ask more. I moved through the terminal like I moved through the ICU. Efficiently. Unnoticed. At security, I placed my bag on the belt, removed my watch, stepped through the scanner without thinking. Then I heard it. Dr. Reeves? I turned. A young woman in scrubs stood near the TSA checkpoint, a hospital ID clipped to her waistband. Early 20s, tired eyes, nervous smile. She didn't speak again, but she placed her hand over her heart. The same gesture Dr. Ashford had made years ago. A silent acknowledgment that didn't need words. I returned it. Briefly. Quietly. She didn't say how she knew me. Maybe a lecture I'd given. Maybe a case she'd read about. Maybe just whispers that travel faster than facts in medical circles. Whatever it was, she stood a little taller after I acknowledged her. Like it mattered. Like I mattered. I walked to my gate. Half empty. A man snored into a neck pillow. A toddler scattered Cheerios like confetti. I sat by the window and watched planes lift into the dark. Somewhere out there, Marcus was perfecting his toast. Somewhere out there, Dr. Ashford was preparing to celebrate his daughter's wedding. And somewhere inside me, something was settling. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. But I wasn't numb anymore either. I'd been pulled from a residency shortlist without a fair hearing. Labeled difficult. Cold. You. Smiling. Left out of family photos. Forgotten at holidays. But here I was. On a one-way ticket back into the fire. Not for revenge. For truth. For the silence to finally break. My flight boarded without ceremony. I took my seat by the window. The hum of engines beneath me. The weight of distance and memory pressing down. As the plane lifted, I watched the city lights fade. Runways blurred into darkness. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I wasn't who I used to be. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to be seen. I left home after a dinner I can still taste. Dry chicken. Overcooked vegetables. And words sharper than any scalpel I'd ever held. I was 23, the night before Marcus's college graduation. He was the golden boy. The future entrepreneur. Early acceptance to Stanford. Dad had spent weeks planning the celebration. Rented a private room at an upscale restaurant. Hired a photographer. Ordered a custom cake with Marcus's face on it. I showed up in a blazer and slacks, fresh from a clinical rotation. I'd been up for 36 hours, but I came anyway. I wanted them to see me. Just once. Dinner was tense from the start. Mom didn't comment on how tired I looked. Dad barely made eye contact. Marcus was on his phone, waiting for congratulations texts from people more important than me. Then over dessert, Mom set down her fork and said, "If you talk about the hospital tomorrow, don't bother coming." Just like that. 13 words that landed like a diagnosis. Terminal. She said it the same way she'd remind us to say thank you. Calm. Practiced. Final. I didn't speak. Didn't move. Dad said nothing. Marcus smirked at his plate like it was funny. I stood up. Pushed back my chair. Folded my napkin. No one stopped me. Not even the waiter. I walked out with my keys in one hand and my dignity in the other. I didn't take anything with me. No childhood photos. No keepsakes. No second chances. That was 15 years ago. I didn't go to Marcus's graduation. I didn't visit for birthdays. I wasn't there when our grandmother died, when Marcus got his first big investor, or when Dad had a minor stroke. I sent cards. And signed. I wired money through distant accounts. I stayed in the shadows because that's what they wanted. A daughter who stayed quiet. A sister who disappeared cleanly. I built my life in the surgical suite, one case at a time. But here's the truth. That night, when I walked out, I wasn't hurt. I was free. Because it told me exactly who I was up against. Not a disease. Not a failing body. But a silence that lived in my own family. A silence that punished difference, that mocked strength, that found conformity more valuable than courage. I never had that chicken again. Never craved it. But I remember the exact angle of my mother's jaw when she delivered that line. If you talk about the hospital tomorrow, don't bother coming. I talked about it anyway. And I never went back. Until now. The first thing that hit me was the scent. Gardenias and champagne, thick enough to choke on. The second was the silence beneath the spectacle. I stepped into the ballroom and paused just inside the doors. Crystal chandeliers dripped light like rain. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the river outside, dark and glittering. Orchids and white roses climbed every surface. The kind of wedding Marcus had always dreamed of. The kind that came with a hashtag and a drone video. Every detail shimmered. Even the napkins had custom monograms, his initials intertwined with hers like they were fused at the molecular level. I scanned the seating chart. Names engraved on frosted glass panels, backlit like an art installation. Rows and rows of guests. College friends. Business partners. Distant cousins. Not me. There was no Reeves listed, no Maya, not even a generic +1. No table. No card. No acknowledgement. I didn't flinch. I'd packed a protein bar in my clutch just in case. A server passed with champagne flutes. I took one. Another offered hors d'oeuvres. I declined. No one greeted me. No one looked twice. That's what happens when you learn to move like a surgeon. Efficient. Invisible. Necessary but unnoticed. Still, I was there. I walked the perimeter slowly. Heels muted on thick carpet. The DJ was testing sound levels with a string quartet cover of a pop song I didn't recognize. A table invited guests to write advice for the couple. The pens were arranged in the shape of a heart. Another station displayed a photo wall titled Our Favorite Memories. I scanned the images. Marcus laughing. Marcus hiking. Marcus at graduation. Marcus on yachts and slopes and stages. Not a single photo included me. Not one. I stared at the wall for a moment. Not because it hurt. I'd already cauterized that wound. But because it confirmed what I knew. I'd been excised from the narrative years ago. Cleanly. Deliberately. I didn't resent it. I just noted it. Like charting a patient's history. No family support. No safety net. Proceed accordingly. Still, I stayed. I sipped the champagne. Not to numb anything. Just to blend in. I found a spot near the back, not even a real table, just a bench near the coat check and a potted fern meant to hide electrical panels. It was fine. I didn't come to be seen. I came to see. My name hadn't been spoken all night. Until now. Marcus held the microphone like it was a trophy. The spotlight turned him golden. He was already tipsy, or performing it. And now, he said with exaggerated reverence, I'd like to thank a very special guest. My sister Maya. Laughter rippled through the crowd like a pre-recorded track. She's here somewhere, probably diagnosing someone's posture. Seriously, who shows up to a wedding looking like they just got out of rounds? More laughter. Anyone else think she might try to operate on the cake? My name landed L. Like a suture pulled too tight. Sharp. Controlled. Painful. I didn't blink. But Marcus's groom, his new brother-in-law, did. He leaned toward the man beside him and whispered something urgent. The man turned his head. Slowly. Deliberately. It was Dr. Leonard Ashford. I recognized him instantly. Rigid posture. Steel gray hair. A presence that didn't need announcement. Our eyes met. For 1 second, the room held its breath. His brow furrowed. Not in confusion. In recognition. He stood. Buttoned his jacket. Squared his shoulders. And turned to face me. Then he placed his hand over his heart. Dr. Reeves, he said. His voice carried across the silent room. The honor is ours. Time didn't stop. It cracked. Silverware froze. Glasses paused midair. A bridesmaid gasped audibly. I heard Marcus inhale sharply. The microphone slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a sharp pop. It rolled toward the edge of the stage. Celeste grabbed his arm. He didn't move. But others did. An older man at table 6 stood, hand on his chest. Then a woman in a navy gown. A resident in a bow tie. One by one, they rose. Surgeons. Nurses. Fellows. Even a paramedic I vaguely recognized. Not in unison. Not rehearsed. But real. A silent wave of respect swept through the room. Not for spectacle. Not for show. But for something earned. Years of night shifts. Lives saved. Codes run. Families consoled. Papers no one would ever read. I hadn't asked for it. Hadn't hinted at it. But they knew. And Marcus, his face twisted. First confusion. Then something rawer. Panic. Disbelief. Like the script had been ripped from his hands and set on fire. I didn't rise. I didn't need to. I stayed seated. Back straight. Hands still. I met every gesture with a nod. Not out of humility. Out of understanding. Respect is not given. It is earned. And once earned, it doesn't bend under glitter or gossip. Marcus stumbled back from the mic, reaching for Celeste, who had gone pale. His mouth moved. No sound came. He turned to Dr. Ashford as if looking for an anchor. But the man remained standing. Gaze fixed on me like I was the only solid thing in the room. The music had stopped. The spotlight shifted. And somehow, it found me. I didn't flinch. This wasn't about revenge. This was a reckoning. In that moment, no one cared about seating charts or sibling rivalry or custom cocktails. They saw me. Not Maya the sister. Not the outcast. Not the cautionary tale. The surgeon. The one who didn't need a microphone to be heard. I raised my glass. Not to toast. Just to acknowledge. Let them remember. Celeste took a step back. Her face, moments ago glowing with champagne confidence, drained to something brittle. Her lips parted. No sound came. Her hands, so steady when she'd held the bouquet, now trembled. She gripped Marcus's arm like it might keep her upright. It was just a joke, she said. Too soft at first. Then louder. He was just joking. No. One laughed. Not her bridesmaids. Not the groomsmen. Not a single guest in the sea of black tie elegance. She looked around, desperate for someone to agree, to validate, to restore the moment as she'd imagined it. But no one moved. The microphone lay on the floor, forgotten. Even the DJ stood frozen at his console. This is ridiculous, Marcus said, voice cracking under its own weight. You don't even know her. Dr. Ashford didn't speak. He didn't need to. He remained standing. Hand over heart. Eyes on me. He wasn't defending me. He was honoring me. That distinction changed everything. She's my sister, Marcus tried again, voice rising like he was drowning. She's not even close to the family anymore. Still, silence. The gravity of the room had shifted. He wasn't the center. Someone coughed in the back. That was it. Marcus took another step backward. His polished shoe caught the edge of the stage platform. He stumbled slightly, catching himself on the podium. The image of control shattered. It happened fast, but felt slow. The groom, center of attention, architect of the evening, was now a silhouette against his own celebration. His tuxedo gleamed too bright under the spotlight. And in that glare, he saw what no one dared say aloud. This moment no longer belonged to him. He had scripted everything. The vows. The playlist. The seating chart. He'd even chosen which photos would be projected during the reception. But he hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected silence to be louder than applause. He hadn't expected respect to outweigh a punchline. And he hadn't expected to be alone, utterly and completely alone in the moment he had worked so hard to dominate. He looked at me then. Really looked. Not apology in his eyes. Not yet. But fear. Recognition. Like for the first time, he saw something beyond the sister he'd dismissed. He saw the woman who had walked into that room not to make a scene, but to exist with quiet dignity. And Marcus, he disappeared. Not physically. But emotionally. The crowd didn't exile him. He exiled himself. Unraveling beneath the lights he'd arranged. And I remained still. Because I didn't need to rise to reclaim my name. It was already standing. I didn't need applause. I didn't need a speech, a spotlight, or a standing ovation. I had never come for any of it. I stood slowly. Quietly. Smoothing the fabric of my dress like brushing off years of silence. Around me, the room remained frozen. I wasn't part of the script Marcus had written. But somehow, I had become the ending. I didn't look at him. Not because I wanted to be cruel. But because I knew he wasn't ready for what I represented. Truth, unvarnished. I walked past the head table where Celeste's bouquet still lay untouched. Past the champagne tower that hadn't been opened. Past the designer runner Marcus had insisted be exactly 16 feet long. My heels echoed across the floor like a slow heartbeat. No applause followed. No whispers. Only Stiln. And then Dr. Ashford. He took one step back as I approached. Not out of retreat. Out of deference. Dr. Reeves, he said again. Quieter this time. Not for the room. Just for me. I nodded once. My voice stayed in my chest. I had nothing more to prove. I passed him and kept walking. Eyes forward. Posture straight. The doors at the back of the ballroom came into view. Heavy wood. Brass handles. A young man in a suit, maybe part of the catering staff, reached to open them. But I lifted a hand. I opened them myself. Because walking through them was mine to do. The hallway outside was quiet. Carpeted. Lined with soft sconces and mirrors meant for last-minute touch-ups. But here, now, it was something else. It was peace. Behind me, I heard nothing. Not footsteps chasing after me. Not Marcus's voice trying to rewrite the story. Not a single apology. And I didn't need one. I had waited years for someone to speak my name without mocking it. Years for someone to see my work not as a quirk or a flaw, but as sacrifice, as integrity, as something earned. That had happened. And now I was done. I didn't rush. I walked with the rhythm of someone who had crossed hospital corridors at 3 a.m., who had scrubbed in for 12-hour surgeries, who knew that real strength is measured not in noise but in what you carry quietly. And as the doors eased shut behind me, the final sound that drifted into the corridor wasn't applause. It was silence. But not empty silence. The kind that follows a storm. The kind that clears the air. The kind that changes everything. They would talk about me now. But not like before. Not in whispers. Not in mockery. And certainly not with Marcus's laugh. I didn't need a seat at the table. I carried my own. 4 days later, I was back at Logan. Terminal B, Gate 18. I had my surgical schedule printed in my bag, my phone charging beside me, and a black coffee going cold on the armrest. I'd left the family group chat that morning. No one noticed. The speakers crackled with a boarding announcement. Some delay over weather in Pittsburgh. I barely reacted. But the sound of footsteps, hesitant, deliberate, made me look up. Marcus stood 15 feet away. No tuxedo. No spotlight. Just jeans and a faded sweatshirt. Sleeves pushed up like he used to wear them during finals week in college. Only this time, his eyes were different. He didn't walk closer. He just reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Creased. Worn. Like it had been opened and refolded too many times. He held it out. I stood and took it. It was the complaint. The complaint. The one from 5 years ago that had derailed my residency. The one filled with lies and one unmistakable tell. Irregardless. There it was. Circled in red pen. Fresh ink. I looked up. He was already watching me. You always corrected me on that, he essayed. I quietly. Even when we were kids. I didn't answer. I waited. He looked down. Bit his lip. Then met my eyes again. Not with fake tears. Not with rehearsed remorse. Just something raw. They wanted a son who was charming. Who smiled when told. Who made them look good at parties. He took a shaky breath. You didn't care about any of that. You just worked. And they hated you for it. His voice cracked. Not loudly. Just enough. I wanted them to love me. So I let them choose me. I let them decide which one of us deserved to be celebrated. He shook his head. But that meant you had to disappear. I stared at him. At the man who once called my scrubs depressing and my ambition exhausting. The man who had written this. Or signed off on it. He didn't say sorry. Not once. But he didn't look away either. I didn't think you'd actually come to the wedding, he said. When I saw you there, I thought maybe you'd moved on. I folded the paper slowly. Pressed the creases back into place. You wanted to erase me, I said. Not angry. Just truth. But you forgot who taught you how to survive. His lip trembled. He nodded. You did. That's the part one couldn't erase. We stood there. Just two siblings on airport carpet. No cameras. No audience. No performance. And for the first time in 15 years, Marcus looked at me without pretense. Without needing to be the favorite. For the first time, he looked at me like he saw himself. Reflected. Flawed. Unfinished. He didn't ask for forgiveness. I wasn't ready to offer it. But something passed between us anyway. Not a bridge. Not yet. Just a crack in the wall. He tucked his hands into his pockets. Stepped back. Gate 22, he said. I'm flying coach this time. I watched him walk away. He didn't look back. And I didn't stop him. A week after the airport, I received an email. Subject line, I was wrong. From Celeste Ashford Reeves. At first, I didn't open it. I stared at the notification like it might vanish if I ignored it long enough. But something about those 3 words lingered. Not because they fixed anything. But because they didn't try to. That evening, I found myself at a quiet cafe near the hospital. Off shift. No scrubs. Just my old leather jacket and a table by the window. Celeste showed up 10 minutes late. She looked smaller without the wedding gown. Tired. Like the applause had drained out of her, leaving just the person underneath. She didn't sit right away. She stood across from me, purse clutched like a shield. I ordered tea, she said. Didn't think I deserved coffee. I raised an eyebrow. You thought right. She took the chair lowly. No polished smile now. No charm. Just silence for a few beats. Then, I knew something was off. She didn't say Marcus's name. I knew the timing didn't make sense. You're not the kind of person to cut corners. I didn't say anything. Let her continue. I asked him once, she said. Just casually. He got defensive so fast. Accused me of trying to ruin our engagement. I backed off. She gave a hollow laugh. I shouldn't have. I met her eyes. You made a choice. You chose the version of me that was easier to doubt. She swallowed hard. Yeah. I did. I watched her sit with it. Let the words settle like sediment. I didn't think it would matter, she said. Figured you'd bounce back. You always seemed so strong. I leaned forward slightly. Strong people break too. We just do it where no one's watching. Her shoulders dropped. The confidence that once carried her through hospital galas and charity brunches was gone. I wasn't ready to believe he'd do something like that, she said quietly. But seeing you that night. How you stood when everyone else was sitting. I realized something. She paused. I picked the wrong side. I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't just ashamed. She was haunted. What do you want from me? I asked. Tone even. Nothing, she said. Just to say it out loud. So you'd know. So I'd have to carry it with a name on it. Not just guilt. That surprised me. Not the confession. But the clarity. We sat in silence for a while after that. No drinks. No toasts. Just the hum of espresso machines and distant conversation. As I got up to leave, she stood too. Not to follow. Just to see me off. I hope someday you believe I meant it, she said. I gave her a nod. Not forgiveness. Not absolution. Just acknowledgment. And then I left. Quietly, as I always had. But this time, I knew who walked away heavier. I stepped into the conference room at Massachusetts General without fanfare. No name plaque. No podium introduction. Just a rectangular table, gray chairs, hospital administrators in muted suits, and a screen waiting to go live. My name wasn't printed in bold on the agenda. But my presence held the room still. The lights dimmed. The first slide appeared. MAYA. Not my name. An acronym. Medical Advocacy for Young Aspiring Professionals. A system built not for glory, but for protection. For medical professionals betrayed by those closest to them. Family. Partners. Colleagues. The kind of betrayal that doesn't leave scars you can see, just makes you question whether you deserve to be in the room at all. I had once stood in rooms like this presenting trauma protocols, surgical innovations, life-saving interventions. But this was different. This wasn't about saving a patient on the table. It was about saving the person holding the scalpel. For years ago, I was quietly removed from chief resident consideration. No investigation. No hearing. Just a letter. Anonymous. Baseless. But effective. I clicked to the next slide. A redacted version of T. He complaint appeared. Irregardless circled in red. I knew who wrote it. But I also knew the system had no mechanism to vet personal sabotage unless it crossed into legal territory. Reputation, I said, apparently is expendable. I moved through the framework. The structure. The safeguards. Maya would function as an internal support network. Confidential reporting integrated with counseling, legal resources, and peer mentorship. Not to punish blindly. But to protect intentionally. Not every threat comes from a patient, I said. And not every wound happens in the OR. Someone from Human Resources spoke up. How do we verify credibility? I nodded. Trained reviewers with clinical and administrative backgrounds. It's not about chasing accusations. It's about recognizing patterns. Another voice. Why now? I met their gaze. Because some of us have spent years treating wounds we were told didn't exist. The room quieted. Not in opposition. In recognition. I clicked to the final slide. A map of the country with data points lit across every major hospital. Representing the number of medical professionals who had, in the past 3 years, transferred programs, left residencies early, or declined promotions, citing family conflict or personal stress. The numbers were staggering. This isn't just my story, I said. Voice calm. It's hundreds. Maybe thousands. Most won't speak up. Some can't. I didn't need applause. I didn't want pity. I wanted the next Maya to have options. Not between silence and exile. But between healing, staying, or rising. When I finished, I stepped back. One woman stood. An older physician who'd worked in pediatrics for 30 years. My nephew left his surgical program last year, she said. Filed nothing. Just disappeared. Told me later his father had been sabotaging his applications to force him into the family business. She didn't say more. She didn't need to. I met her eyes. She gave a slight nod. I left the room the way I'd entered. Steady. Unnoticed. But not unseen. Not this time. And behind me, Maya stayed on the screen. No longer just my project. It had become a mirror. And maybe a door. When I was promoted to attending, there was no call from home. No card. No text from Marcus. The ceremony took place in a small auditorium at Harbor General. No press. No fanfare. Just the people who had worked beside me through the chaos. My team showed up. Respectful. Quiet. Just the way I preferred. But there was a chair. A single empty chair to my left. Intentionally unfilled. No one asked about it. No one offered to sit in it. That chair wasn't meant for them. It was meant for a version of me that almost didn't survive. The girl who once stood in a hospital bathroom at 2 a.m., hands still shaking from a code she'd run, wondering if her mother was right. That no one would respect a woman who chose scalpels over softness. It was for the 23-year-old who walked out of that restaurant and never went back. It was for the woman who questioned whether ambition and isolation were the same thing. Whether trading family for a career was a sacrifice or a necessity. That chair was for her. For me. There was a moment just before the title was conferred when the room went still. The chief of staff read the citation. Exemplary service. Leadership under pressure. Commitment to excellence. Words that could apply to anyone. But I knew they weren't hollow. Because I remembered the surgeries where I chose between two impossible outcomes. The colleagues I'd lost to burnout. The nights I rewrote protocols while others slept. The way I built systems to protect people who'd never know my name. I remembered the cost. When the certificate was handed to me, I didn't look out at the crowd. I looked left. At the chair. It didn't need to be filled. Its presence was enough. Afterward, while others gathered over coffee and small talk, I lingered. One of my residents, Dr. Park, approached me. "Dr. Reeves," she said gently. I noticed the chair. Was someone supposed to be here? I smiled. Not bitter. Not sad. Just quiet. She was, I said. She just didn't know it yet. Dr. Park didn't ask more. Just nodded and walked away, her footsteps soft on the tile. That chair stayed behind when I left. Not because I forgot it. But because it didn't belong to just me anymore. It became something I carried in every room I led from that day forward. A space held open. Not for someone else's approval. But for every doctor, every nurse, every resident who ever doubted their worth because the world didn't clap when they walked in. We deserve better than that. And sometimes we have to be the ones who save a seat for the version of ourselves that nearly gave up. To remind her, you made it. And you're not invisible anymore. Marcus was 12 when he broke his arm falling off his skateboard in our driveway. He'd been trying to impress a group of neighborhood kids. Trying to keep up with me. Mine was faster. I didn't wait. He hit the pavement wrong and I heard the crack from across the street. By the time I got to him, his face was pale and his arm was bent at an angle that made my stomach turn. But he didn't cry. Not until I knelt beside him and said, "You're going to be okay." Then the tears came. We didn't have a car. Mom was at work. So I fashioned a sling out of my jacket, walked him 3 blocks to the urgent care, and stayed with him through the x-rays. He looked at me afterward like I'd just saved his life. That same night, Dad told him he should have been more careful. Said Marcus needed to stop trying to be like me. Ma. Gus didn't say anything at the time. But later in the dark of our shared room, I heard him whisper, "I don't want to be your shadow." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't care. But because I didn't know how. Back then, I thought love meant protecting someone at all costs. Being the strong one. The fast one. The one who didn't look back. But what it looked like to him was that I never left room for him. The truth is, Marcus didn't want to be me. He wanted to be seen like me. And over time, when my name started appearing in medical journals, when I got that research grant, when I was interviewed on a local news segment about trauma care, something inside him curled inward. He wanted his own spotlight. Not to share mine. Not to follow me. So when he realized the only way to shine in our family was to dim the person blocking the sun, he tried. He didn't do it with violence. He did it with precision. Removing me from family photos. Leaving me off group chats. Rewriting memories that were half mine. It wasn't sudden betrayal. It was slow. Calculated. Almost understandable. Almost. Because I get it now. I understand what it's like to want to be known. Not as someone's sister. Someone's shadow. But as yourself. To want a name that stands alone. But understanding isn't the same as forgiving. Because he didn't just step into his own light. He tried to extinguish mine. That day at the hospital, when his name appeared on the anonymous complaint that nearly destroyed my career, he wasn't protecting himself. He was silencing me. I wish I could say I'm angry. That would be easier. But the truth is, I'm tired. Tired of holding love and grief in the same hand. Tired of hoping that one day he'll look at me and remember the girl who walked him to urgent care with a makeshift sling and the best intentions. But maybe he will. Maybe not today. Maybe not ever. But I'll remember it for both of us. My mother once called me the embarrassment of the family. Not to my face. Not directly. But in the way her voice tightened when someone asked what I did. The way she changed the subject at gatherings. The way she displayed Marcus's business awards on the mantle but left my medical school diploma in a box in the garage. It wasn't always like that. When I was small, she used to braid my hair before school. She made me pancakes shaped like hearts. There was love once. Real love. But it had conditions. A shape I had to fit into. That shape didn't wear scrubs or speak in medical terminology. It didn't challenge expectations or ask uncomfortable questions. That shape wore dresses. Smiled politely. And never made anyone feel less than. When I chose medicine, I shattered the mold. She didn't yell. She withdrew. And for years, the space between us was cold and careful and hollow. Her silence spoke volumes. She told relatives I could have done anything. But I chose to disappear into a hospital. No one ever asked me if the hospital was where I found myself. And the day I left, after that dinner, when I wore my professional clothes despite her warning, she didn't stop me. She just cleared the table and said, "Don't come back if you can't be part of this family properly." So I didn't. Not for holidays. Not for celebrations. Not even when Dad was hospitalized. And in that distance, I built my own identity. One not tethered to her expectations or the roles she assigned like homework. But things shift. After the wedding. After the silence that spoke louder than any toast. She called me. Her voice shook when she said, "I saw what happened at Marcus's wedding. Everyone's talking about it." Then quieter. "You're my daughter." And I said nothing. Because by then, I didn't need her permission to exist fully. Later, we met at a cafe near the hospital where she used to pick me up from volunteer shifts. She brought Earl Grey tea and shortbread cookies wrapped in a paper napkin. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Not just in years. But in surrender. She didn't say I'm sorry. Not directly. But she reached across the table and touched my hand. It trembled. "I should have stood up for you," she whispered. And for the first time, her tears weren't about disappointment. They were about regret. About time. Lost time. The years she stayed silent in a role she thought protected the family when all it did was fracture it. Now she calls me her daughter. My accomplished daughter. But I don't need those words anymore. I don't need to be celebrated or reclaimed or brought back into the fold. I just need the truth to be acknowledged. And when my mother finally cried, not for Marcus, not for appearances, but for me, I saw that maybe, just maybe, healing doesn't always start with words. Sometimes it starts with tears. I stood at the podium at the National Healthcare Leadership Summit. The emblem of the American Medical Association projected behind me. Rows of white coats, administrators, journalists, and policymakers stretched before me. I adjusted the microphone. My notes sat folded beside me. But I didn't read from them. My voice didn't waver. I had learned how to speak when my body wanted to disappear. My name is Dr. Maya Reeves, I began. I've spent over a decade in medicine. I've worked in trauma bays. I've briefed hospital boards. I've held the hands of dying patients. I've made calls that changed the trajectory of families. There was no reaction yet. Just stillness. Just attention. I tell you this not for recognition, but for context. Because despite all that, there was a time I wasn't seen. Not by a patient. Not by a system. But by my own family. A shift moved through the room. I was excluded from family events. Left off photo walls. My work was called obsessive. My prison. See at a celebration, inappropriate. I let the silence stretch. I was written out of my own family's story. Not because I failed. But because I didn't fit their definition of success. No murmurs. No shifting. Just listening. Focused. I tell you this here, at a place where narratives shape policy and recognition becomes legacy, because we cannot build a healthcare system that values all who serve if we still quietly permit the erasure of those who don't conform. I paused. Scanned the front rows. Medical students. Senior physicians. Young nurses. Hospital CEOs. 3 years ago, I said, I was the subject of an anonymous complaint. A fabricated one. Someone tried to discredit me. Not with facts. But with words like difficult. Uncooperative. Emotional. More than a few people nodded slightly. Everyone in that room knew those were code words. That letter was never substantiated because it couldn't be. But it did what it was meant to do. It isolated me. Quieted me. I held up a single sheet of paper. Not the complaint. But the approval letter for the MAYA initiative. Today, I said, I'm here to launch something new. A support system for healthcare professionals who experience betrayal from within their own circles. Personal or professional. I stepped aside as the screen lit up behind me. Maya. Medical advocacy for young aspiring professionals. We will offer legal support. Mental health resources. Confidential reporting. Peer networks. And a formal tracking system to document how often personal betrayal intersects with professional consequence. A murmur of interest rippled through the audience. Phones lit up. Pens moved. I'm not here for revenge, I said. I'm here because silence almost made me forget my own worth. I won't let that happen to others. I took a breath. Then closed with words I hadn't planned. I was once told not to talk about my work at a family event because it made people uncomfortable. I looked out over the sea of white coats and stethoscopes. But I talked about it anyway. And I'll keep talking about it. Not because I need to prove anything. But because I know now that being uncomfortable is not the same as being wrong. And being invisible does not mean being unworthy. The room stayed quiet. Not a dismissive quiet. A respectful one. One that understood that some truths don't need applause to resonate. I stepped down from the stage. Someone began to clap. Just one person at first. Then another. Then the room rose. Not with thunder. But with understanding. They weren't clapping because I won. They were clapping because I told the truth. A photo started circulating 2 weeks after the conference. It wasn't staged or professional. One had taken it from a distance. Marcus standing alone on a pier at dawn. His suit jacket slung over his shoulder. Hair undone. No caption. Just the ocean stretching endlessly behind him. I didn't seek it out. Someone forwarded it to me. Have you seen this? I stared at it longer than I intended. Celeste had filed for separation. His company had quietly let him go. Our parents had distanced themselves, privately and publicly. I wasn't surprised. They'd never handled scandal well. And for the first time, Marcus wasn't spinning a narrative or pointing fingers or building a defense. He was just there. Present in his own reckoning. His expression wasn't performative. It was raw. Clear in a way I didn't remember seeing before. Later that week, I received a small package at the hospital. No return address. No note. Just a photo tucked inside a plain envelope. 2 kids standing side by side in a dark garage. Each holding a flashlight. The image was grainy. Clearly scanned from an old print. But I remembered it instantly. That was us. We'd gone exploring during a power outage when we were 10 and 12. Dad had told us to stay inside. But Marcus insisted we look for the circuit breaker. I followed because I always did. We took turns leading with our flashlights until we found the old toolbox Dad had been looking for. We sat on the concrete floor, legs crossed, inventing stories about what we'd discovered. For a few hours, we weren't rivals or competitors. Just kids who believed there was magic in forgotten corners. I held the photo in my hands for a long time. No apology. No explanation. Just that image. And for the first time, I didn't need words. Marcus had started therapy. Someone told me he was attending group sessions in Brooklyn. He'd moved into a small studio near Prospect Park. Living alone. Working part-time at a nonprofit. He wasn't pretending anymore. He hadn't asked for forgiveness. But he'd sent that picture. To remind me that once, before everything got twisted and rewritten and erased, we had stood side by side in the dark. With flashlights. And that was something. That was a beginning. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure if I would. But I kept the photo in my locker at work. Not for nostalgia. Not to reopen wounds. But because some bridges don't burn. They just wait quietly. Until someone brings a light. 3 weeks after the summit, a handwritten letter arrived at my office. Heavy cardstock. Elegant script. No hospital logo. Just a name embossed at the top. Dr. Leonard Ashford. I unfolded the single page and for a moment, I simply stared at the opening line. Dr. Reeves, I owe you more than a gesture of RESP. ECT. He had written it himself. Each word carefully formed. Deliberate. That evening at the wedding, I stood not only because I knew your name. I stood because I realized how long I had failed to see it. When Marcus first told me about Celeste's family, I asked about her background. Her accomplishments. I never once thought to ask about her soon-to-be sister-in-law. That was my failure. Not hers. Not yours. The letter continued. They will doubt you still. Some will minimize what they cannot comprehend. They'll write headlines that mention your credentials as footnotes, not foundations. But let them. Let them reveal themselves. Because what they cannot do anymore, what none of us can do anymore, is ignore you. I paused. Looked out my office window. Below, residents crossed the courtyard in their white coats. The rhythm of the institution I had served for over a decade. I'd spent so much of it being excellent in silence. Being essential but unnoticed. Earning titles while others collected praise. Your initiative, MAYA, will challenge more than protocol. I've heard the reactions. I've seen the resistance behind closed doors. But I want you to know it matters. And it will endure. If any physician, especially one of my generation, needs to relearn how to recognize women like you, then let him start with me. That line stopped me cold. I read it twice. Then again. I had expected professional courtesy. Maybe a commendation. I did not expect that. An admission. A reckoning. A rebuilding, written in ink. The letter closed with words that felt less like an ending, more like an opening. You remind us what leadership looks like when forged in isolation. You are not an anomaly, Maya. You are the beginning of a correction. With deep respect, Dr. Leonard Ashford. I folded the paper carefully. Placed it in a protective sleeve. Locked it in my desk. Not to hide it. But because I understood its weight. A letter from a legend wouldn't rewrite history. But it told me history could be corrected. One acknowledgement at a time. And sometimes those acknowledgements arrive not with fanfare. But with a signature. I live in a stone cottage on the coast of Maine now. The water here isn't just blue. It's layered. Silver in the morning. Charcoal at dusk. Navy where the cliffs drop into the deep. It moves. Like a living thing. Breathing in light. Breathing out calm. Most mornings begin with watercolors. The small studio I set up on the enclosed porch faces the sunrise. I don't paint masterpieces. I paint memory. Fractured images. 2 kids with flashlights. A surgeon standing beside an empty air. 2 figures on a pier facing opposite directions. I let the colors finish what words never could. By mid-morning, the mail arrives. A local teenager named Lily delivers it. She's 17. Bright-eyed. Full of questions. On her second visit, she asked what I did before moving here. I told her, I used to help people when they couldn't help themselves. That seemed enough for her. Afternoons belong to the MAYA Foundation. We now have 6 active programs across the country. 1 in Boston. 1 in Atlanta. 1 in Seattle. And 3 more in development. The mission is simple. When a healthcare professional faces betrayal from those closest, family, partners, colleagues, there should be a safety net. Not just legal. But human. Someone who can say, I've been there. And we believe you. I write program evaluations. Impact reports. Grant proposals. But sometimes I receive something else. A letter from a resident who lost a fellowship opportunity after her brother sabotaged her recommendation letters. A paramedic whose credentials were questioned by a spouse who worked in hospital administration. Their stories are different. But I recognize the quiet devastation in their words. I know what it feels like to be erased without a single visible wound. Medicine is no longer on my daily schedule. But it's still in my bones. I feel it in the way I organize my supplies. In the way I check the locks twice before bed. In the way my eyes assess a room before I enter it. I don't miss the late nights. I miss the clarity. That exact moment when you act. Not for applause. But for purpose. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed silent at that wedding. If I'd smiled through the joke and left unnoticed. I wonder how much longer it would have taken for Marcus to face himself. For Celeste to choose truth over comfort. For me to realize silence wasn't humility. It was self-erasure. But I didn't stay silent. And because I didn't, something shifted. Just enough to let light fall into corners it had never reached before. A few evenings ago, I painted a scene from memory. A long hallway. Soft light. An empty chair. And a woman walking forward. Not in defeat. Not in anger. But in peace. Lily saw it the next morning. She pointed to the woman. Is that you? I nodded. She doesn't look sad, Lily said. She looks whole. I smiled. Didn't answer. Some truths don't need explanation. They just need to be lived. Quietly. Fully. One day at a time. The ocean outside crashes and calms. I breathe with it. And for the first time in years, I feel completely, undeniably alive. It was late afternoon when the call came. I'd just finished cleaning brushes when my phone buzzed. The number was blocked. But something in me already knew. I answered. A voice, measured, professional, familiar, came through. Dr. Reeves, it began, though I hadn't practiced medicine in over a year. We'd like you to consider leading the newly established National Medical Integrity Council. I paused. The Atlantic wind curled through the open window. Cool and salted. Below, a sailboat traced the horizon like a question mark. I see, I said carefully. The voice continued. Your advocacy. Your vision for systemic reform. Your leadership. You're the reason this council exists. We believe you're the one to guide it. My hand rested on the windowsill. The sun was beginning its descent, casting amber light across the wooden floors. I thought of all the years I'd spent inside structures built on hierarchy and protocol. I thought of how long I had measured my worth by evaluations, titles, and assignments that demanded excellence but rarely acknowledged the person delivering it. For a moment, I imagined saying yes. I could see it clearly. The press conferences. The panel discussions. The policy meetings. The quiet resistance from those who would respect my credentials but resent my presence. I could do it. I had the knowledge. The experience. The scars. But then I saw Lily's sketch from that morning. Still drying on the table. 2 figures holding flashlights. Shining into a cave. One of them had wings. I'm honored, I finally said. Truly. But no. A pause. No? Yes. No. I said it again, this time without hesitation. I believe in the mission. I'll consult if you need me. I'll recommend candidates. Brilliant ones. But I won't lead it. May I ask why? You just did, I replied gently. And the answer is simple. It's time for someone else. Someone who hasn't already bled for a seat at that table. I could feel the confusion through the silence. But also, perhaps, respect. I understand. Thank you for your honesty, Dr. Reeves. Take care of it, I said. And don't forget who it's meant to protect. The line went quiet. Then disconnected. I set the phone down. Outside, the lighthouse bell chimed 5 times. A woman below hung laundry on a line. Lily waved at me from across the street, backpack bouncing. I waved back. Some would say I turned away from power. But they'd be wrong. I chose freedom. Not to abandon responsibility. But to reclaim something I'd long forgotten I was allowed to want. A life that wasn't defined solely by what I could endure. I earned that life. And for once, I chose it. Not because someone needed me to. But because I needed me to. I don't need anyone's apology anymore. I don't need the family who erased me to call me courageous. I don't need strangers to whisper my name like I'm a cautionary tale. I don't even need the credentials to mean more than the silence I once survived. All I ask is this. Don't teach another child they have to diminish someone else to be valued. Don't raise daughters to believe there's only one spotlight. And don't raise sons to think silence keeps them safe. I lived too long chasing validation that never came. I wore my white coat like armor. Not just against illness. But against shame. Against invisibility. For a while, it worked. I became everything they said I couldn't. And still, I came home to silence. But I've stopped asking for a place at the table. I built my own. Now I live not to be remembered. But to remember others. To the quiet ones in the back of the room. To those told they were too intense or not soft enough. To anyone who has ever been muted in their own story. I see you. And more importantly, you are still here. That matters. That always mattered. I'm not living to be a legend. I'm living to remind the erased that we're not gone. We're just getting started. Before I say goodbye, I'd love to know where are you right now? Is it a quiet morning with your first cup of tea? Or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let me know in the comments. I read each one with gratitude. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the Final Watch. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in resilience, healing, and the courage to stand in your own light. Thank you for spending your time here today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't announce itself. It waits quietly until you're ready to see it. Take care. And I'll see you in the next story.